The silence of space was absolute, a vast and infinite abyss where only the whispers of the past seemed to linger. Captain Elias Drake stood on the bridge of the Valor's raft, his fingers clenched behind his back as he gazed at the debris field stretching before him. Twisted metal, shattered hulls, and lifeless bodies drifted in the void, a haunting memorial to the fallen. This was no ordinary battle, Lieutenant Mara Voss murmured beside him, her voice barely above a whisper. They didn't just fight here, they were slaughtered. Drake's jaw tightened. He had seen countless battlefields in his years of service. But this was different. The remnants of the Celestial Vanguard, one of the most formidable fleets of the Galactic Resistance, lay in ruin, and there was no sign of their enemy. A beeping sound from the communications console snapped him out of his thoughts. "Captain, I've intercepted a distress signal," Ensign Targ announced. "It's faint, barely readable, but it's on a loop." "Patch it through," Drake ordered. The bridge filled with static before a weak, war-torn voice emerged. "To any resistance forces, we were betrayed. It wasn't the Dominion. Repeat, it wasn't the Dominion." Then, silence. Mara turned to Drake, her expression mirroring his own confusion. If it wasn't the Dominion, then who? Drake didn't answer immediately. Instead, he studied the wreckage again. Something wasn't adding up. The Celestial Vanguard had been stationed near Sanctuary Prime, a classified stronghold, to protect the last remnants of humanity's war effort. If they had been wiped out, then Sanctuary Prime was vulnerable if it even still existed. "Set a course for Sanctuary Prime," Drake finally said. "If there are survivors, we need to find them." The ghost of Sanctuary Prime. The journey to Sanctuary Prime took less than 6 hours, but it felt like an eternity. The closer they got, the more uneasy Drake became. Every instinct screamed at him that something was wrong. As the Valor's raft dropped out of hyperspace, the view before them was enough to send chills down even the most hardened soldier's spine. Sanctuary Prime was gone. Not destroyed. Not occupied. Gone. The planet that once housed the last hope of humanity was missing. In its place was an empty void, as if something had torn it from existence itself. "What the hell?" Mara breathed, unable to believe her own eyes. Drake's mind raced. Planets didn't just vanish. "Scan the sector," he ordered. "I want to know if there's anything left." Any trace of what happened. Tarek's hands flew over the console. "I'm detecting residual energy signatures, but it doesn't match anything in our database. It's almost like..." The ship jolted violently, alarms blaring as red warning lights flared across the bridge. "Incoming fire!" shouted a crewman. The view screen flickered to life, revealing the assailants. Not the Dominion. Something else. The ships were sleek, black as the void itself, and unlike anything the Resistance had ever encountered. They moved with unnatural precision, as if they weren't piloted by humans at all. Evasive maneuvers. Drake shouted as the Valor's raft swerved to avoid the incoming barrage. Mara scrambled to the weapons console. Returning fire. Their cannons lit up the dark expanse, but the enemy ships moved too fast. They weaved through the Resistance with impossible agility, striking with deadly efficiency. Drake gritted his teeth. "We need to retreat. Jump to hyperspace now." Tarek froze. "I can't. They've jammed our FDL drive." A cold realization settled over the crew. They were trapped. A desperate escape. Explosions rocked the ship as enemy fighters closed in. Every second felt like an eternity as the Valor's raft tried to hold its own against an enemy they didn't understand. "Their tech is too advanced," Mara panted. "It's like they know our every move before we make it." Drake's mind raced. If this was an execution, they wouldn't waste time with dogfights. They were being toyed with, and that meant the enemy wanted something. "Prepare a distress beacon," he ordered. "Encrypt it maximum range. Someone out there needs to know what happened here." Tark worked fast, fingers flying over the console. Beacon activated, but a blinding blue light engulfed the bridge, and in an instant, everything went dark. Unknown location. Drake woke to silence. His head throbbed, his vision blurred. The last thing he remembered was the blue light, and then nothing. He forced himself to sit up, his surroundings slowly coming into focus. He was in a dimly lit room, the walls made of metallic material he didn't recognize. A single door stood at the far end, and beyond it, the faint hum of machinery. His pulse quickened. This wasn't the Valor's wrath. Footsteps approached. Drake tensed as the door slid open, revealing a figure shrouded in a long, flowing cloak. The figure's face remained hidden beneath a hood, but the voice that followed sent a chill through him. "You are not supposed to be here, Captain Drake." Drake steadied himself. "Who are you?" The figure took a step forward. "We are the true architects of war, and you have just become part of something far greater than you can comprehend." The door slid shut, and the nightmare was only beginning. Darkness pressed in from all sides. Captain Elias Drake's head throbbed as he regained consciousness. The last thing he remembered was the blinding blue light before everything had gone black. Now, he was in an unfamiliar room, its metallic walls smooth and unmarked. A single, dim light flickered overhead, casting long shadows. He pushed himself up, his muscles aching. The air was sterile, with a faint hum of machinery vibrating through the walls. His uniform was intact, but his weapons were gone. Instinctively, he checked his wrist communicator. No signal. The memories rushed back. Sanctuary Prime. Gone. The ambush. The enemy ships that move like specters through the void. And then the voice. "You are not supposed to be here, Captain Drake." The door slid open with a hiss. Drake sprang to his feet, fists clenched. A tall figure in a flowing dark cloak entered, its face hidden beneath a hood. The figure moved with an eerie grace, each step silent. "You are awake," the figure said, its voice cold yet familiar. "Who the hell are you?" Drake demanded. "Where am I?" The figure ignored his question and gestured toward the door. "Come, there are things you must see." Drake hesitated. He had no weapons, no allies, and no idea where he was. But he wasn't going to get answers standing here. He followed the figure into a dimly lit corridor. The walls pulsed with a faint blue glow as though alive. Other hooded figures moved in the shadows, whispering in a language he didn't understand. "This is not a prison," the figure said, as if sensing his thoughts. "It is a sanctuary, one that exists outside your war." Drake scoffed. "Sanctuary? You kidnapped me." "We saved you," the figure corrected. "Had we not intervened, you would be dead." Drake clenched his jaw. "Who are you people?" The figure stopped before a massive doorway. "We are the ones who were forgotten, the architects of war and its last defenders." The door slid open, revealing a vast chamber. At its center, a holographic display showed the known galaxy, except parts of it were missing. Entire sectors had been erased. Drake's blood ran cold. "What is this?" "The truth." The figure raised a hand, and the hologram shifted. Images flashed, battlefields, planets vanishing into nothingness, ships disintegrating mid-flight. "This is what you call the Dominion's war," the figure said. "But the Dominion is not the enemy." Drake narrowed his eyes. "Then who is—" The figure stepped aside, revealing another hologram. It showed a fleet of ships, sleek, black as the void, just like the ones that had ambushed him. "The architects," the figure whispered, "the true masters of war. They erase what they cannot control." Drake's mind raced. "They destroyed Sanctuary Prime?" The figure nodded. "And they will do worse unless they are stopped." Drake exhaled sharply. "Why tell me this? What do you want?" The figure finally pulled back their hood. Drake's heart stopped. It was Admiral Rena Carter, dead for 5 years. Or so he had thought. She met his gaze. "Because, Elias, we need you." Drake's pulse pounded in his ears as the door slammed shut behind the hooded figure. The words still echoed in his mind. The true architects of war. What did that mean? Who were these people? More importantly, why had they taken him instead of killing him outright? His hands moved instinctively to his waist, but his weapons were gone. His uniform had been stripped of any communication devices, leaving him unarmed and completely at the mercy of his captors. He forced himself to take a deep breath. Panic was the enemy. He needed information, and he needed it fast. The walls of his cell hummed softly, as if alive. The metallic structure seemed to pulse with a faint energy, unlike anything he had seen before. This wasn't Dominion technology, nor was it resistance. This was something else entirely. A moment later, the door hissed open again, and two figures entered. One was the hooded individual from before. The other was different, tall, slender, and draped in an intricate, shimmering cloak woven with symbols Drake didn't recognize. Their eyes glowed an eerie blue, scanning him with unsettling intensity. Captain Elias Drake, the second figure intoned, their voice reverberating unnaturally. You have witnessed something you were never meant to see. Drake straightened, locking eyes with a strange being. Yeah? Well, forgive me for not asking permission before my fleet got wiped out. The hooded figure stepped forward. Your fleet was destroyed because it stood in the way of something far greater than your petty war. The resistance to Dominion, they are mere puppets. The real war is being fought beyond the reaches of your comprehension. Drake's mind reeled. Who the hell are you people? The glowing-eyed figure tilted its head. We are the architects, the keepers of balance, the ones who decide the fate of civilizations before they even realize their time has come. Drake clenched his fists. Sounds a lot like tyranny to me. The architect did not react. Instead, they gestured toward a panel on the wall, which flickered to life, displaying a vast holographic star map. Drake's breath caught as he saw familiar planets, resistant strongholds, Dominion capitals, neutral worlds, all connected by lines of energy. This is the weave of the cosmos, the architect explained. For millennia, we have maintained order. When civilizations grow too ambitious, too reckless, we correct them. Drake narrowed his eyes. You correct them by wiping them out? If necessary. Rage bubbled within him, but he forced himself to stay calm. So why am I still alive? The hooded figure finally spoke. Because you are different, Captain Drake. You are adaptable, and adaptability is a rare trait. Drake snorted. Great. So what? You want me to be your errand boy? The architect's glowing eyes flared slightly. Not quite. We want you to witness. Before Drake could respond, the room shifted. The walls seemed to dissolve, and suddenly he was standing in open space. He gasped, instinctively reaching out for balance, but his feet remained grounded on an invisible platform. Before him stretched a vast armada, thousands of ships, each unlike anything built by human hands. Sleek, ominous, and pulsing with an eerie glow, they hovered in perfect formation. This, the architect said, is the force that will decide the fate of your kind. Drake's throat tightened. You're planning an invasion. Not an invasion, the hooded figure corrected. A final decision. Drake's mind raced. If what they were saying was true, then humanity was teetering on the edge of oblivion. The Resistance and Dominion have been fighting each other for so long, blind to the true threat lurking in the shadows. He had to warn them. Clenching his jaw, he turned back to the architect. You're making a mistake. For the first time, the glowing eyes showed something almost resembling amusement. Perhaps, but the cycle must continue. Before Drake could react, a pulse of energy surged through his body. His vision blurred, the world spinning around him, and then darkness. Elsewhere in the universe, Mara Voss paced the deck of the Valor's Wrath, her mind racing. It had been days since Drake vanished, and the crew was growing restless. They were deep in uncharted space, running low on supplies, and worst of all, they had no idea who or what had taken their captain. We can't just sit here, she muttered. Tarek, standing beside her, nodded grimly. I know, but if we make the wrong move, we could be walking right into a trap. Mara exhaled sharply. Then we find out where the trap is, and we spring it on them. She turned to the navigation console, her gaze hard. Set a course for the last known coordinates of Sanctuary Prime. If we're going down fighting. The stars outside the viewport stretched as the ship leaped into hyperspace, heading straight into the unknown. The dim glow of the alien chamber cast eerie shadows across the metallic walls. Captain Elias Drake felt a cold sweat forming at the nape of his neck as he stared at the cloaked figure before him. The enigmatic being had called itself the Architect of War, but its true nature remained a mystery. Behind him, Lieutenant Maravos and Ensign Tark struggled against their bindings, their faces reflecting a mix of defiance and fear. Drake's voice was firm despite the uncertainty gripping his gut. "What do you want from us? Why did you destroy Sanctuary Prime?" The figure tilted its head slightly. "We did not destroy it, Captain. We preserved it." A wave of confusion rippled through the room. Mara shot Drake a questioning glance, while Tark's breath hitched in disbelief. Drake narrowed his eyes. "Preserve it? It's gone. Wiped from existence. Do you expect us to believe it was somehow saved?" "Not saved," the figure corrected. "Moved. Sanctuary Prime was extracted from this reality before it could be obliterated by forces beyond your comprehension." A heavy silence followed. The weight of the revelation pressed against Drake's mind. Extracted? By whom? The figure took a slow step forward. "By us. We have been watching your war for far longer than you realize. The Dominion was never your greatest threat. The true enemy lurks in the unseen layers of reality, waiting for the moment to strike. Had we not intervened, your precious stronghold would have been consumed." Tarek scoffed. "And we're just supposed to take your word for it?" The figure raised a gloved hand, and the room shifted. The walls shimmered, replaced by a vast, holographic projection of the cosmos. It displayed countless stars, nebulae, and then something terrifying. A void, a complete absence of light and matter that devoured entire star systems in its path. Drake's breath caught. "What is that?" "The abyssal entity," the figure answered. "A force older than time itself. It does not conquer. It consumes. Your war with the Dominion has blinded you to the real war, one that has already begun." Mara clenched her jaw. "And what does that have to do with us? Why capture us?" The figure's hooded gaze settled on her. "Because you're the only ones who can stop it." A fractured alliance. The hologram faded, and the walls of the chamber returned to their original form. Drake exchanged wary glances with Mara and Tarek. The claim was extraordinary, but if there was even a sliver of truth to it, then everything they thought they knew was wrong. Drake exhaled sharply. "And what do you expect us to do about it? We're soldiers, not gods. We can't fight something that eats entire star systems. Alone? No. But there is a way to turn the tide," the figure said. "The Dominion is not your enemy in this fight. They are merely pawns, just as you are. But together, there may be hope." Mara shook her head. "You're asking us to form an alliance with the same empire that's been hunting us down for decades. You realize how insane that sounds." "And yet," the figure replied, "it may be your only chance at survival. The Dominion's forces are powerful, but they lack what you possess: ingenuity, adaptability, and a willingness to defy impossible odds." Tarek laughed dryly. "So we just call up the Dominion's Supreme Commander and ask nicely for a truce?" "Not exactly." The figure raised its hand, and the wall shimmered again, revealing a hidden chamber beyond. Inside, a tall figure was bound in chains, one they recognized immediately. Admiral Kale Renar, the Dominion's most feared military strategist. Drake's heart pounded. This just got a hell of a lot more complicated. A deal with the devil. Renar's golden eyes burned with fury as he struggled against his restraints. "I will not entertain the lies of traitors and cowards." Drake stepped forward, locking eyes with the Admiral. "I don't like this any more than you do, but we may not have a choice. If this abyssal entity is real, then our war means nothing." Renar sneered. "And what makes you think I would ever trust you? You and your rebels have been nothing but a thorn in the Dominion's side." Drake crossed his arms. "Because if we don't work together, none of us will be alive to fight for anything." A tense silence stretched between them. Finally, Renar exhaled sharply. "What's the plan?" Drake turned back to the cloaked figure. "You brought us here. You say there's a way to fight back. Start talking." The figure nodded. "There's a weapon, one created eons ago to counter the abyssal entity. But it was lost to time, buried within the Dominion's most guarded archives." Renar tensed. "You mean the Obsidian Codex? That's a myth. A legend used to frighten would-be traitors." "No," the figure said. "It is real, and it is the key to stopping what is coming." Drake felt the weight of the decision pressing upon him. If the Codex was real, it might be the only way to turn the tide. But infiltrating the heart of the Dominion's archives would be suicide. He glanced at Mara, then at Tarek. Looks like we're about to steal the most dangerous secret in the galaxy. Renar's smirk returned. Then let's make history. The die had been cast. The fate of humanity, and perhaps the entire galaxy, hung in the balance. The cold void of space stretched endlessly before them. But within the heart of the Valor's wrath, a fire had been reignited. Captain Elias Drake, bruised and battle-worn, stood at the helm, his crew rallying behind him. They had survived the impossible, escaped the clutches of the enigmatic architects, and now they had one final mission, to ensure the sacrifice of the fallen was not in vain. The ship drifted in the shadow of a distant, dying star, a temporary refuge in the vast unknown. The silence was broken by Lieutenant Maravas's voice, thick with urgency. "Captain, we've decrypted the final transmission from Sanctuary Prime. You're going to want to hear this." Drake nodded, and the message crackled to life over the ship's intercom. It was faint, distorted, but the words carried a weight that pressed upon their chests like the gravity of a collapsing star. "If you are hearing this, you are the last hope. Sanctuary Prime has fallen, but the truth must not die with us. The architects, they are not what they seem. They were never our enemies. They were our creators. And now they seek to erase their mistake. Humanity was never meant to exist." The message cut out abruptly, leaving a hollow silence in its wake. The weight of the revelation settled over the crew like a suffocating shroud. Tarek, his hands trembling over the navigation console, whispered, "They're not just trying to conquer us, they're trying to erase us." Drake clenched his fists, his gaze burning with renewed determination. "Then we make sure they fail." The final stand. The Valor's wrath powered up its engines, streaking toward the only place left where they could make a difference. The remnants of the Resistance's last fleet scattered across the outer systems. If there was any chance to fight back, they needed allies, and fast. As they neared their destination, a grim sight awaited them. The Resistance forces were battered, barely holding together. Ships drifted lifelessly, their hulls scorched and broken. The once mighty fleet was reduced to a handful of war-torn vessels. Drake opened a channel. "This is Captain Elias Drake of the Valor's Wrath. We bring grave news, but we also bring hope. The war is not lost unless we surrender now." A moment of silence followed before a familiar voice responded. Admiral Rains, one of the last surviving Resistance leaders, appeared on the screen, his face hardened by loss but still carrying the embers of defiance. "Drake, if you have a plan, now's the time." Drake exhaled. "We hit them where it hurts. The architects have a central command relay. If we can sever their link to their forces, we level the playing field." Rain smirked, the fire returning to his eyes. "A suicide mission." Drake nodded. "A necessary one." Into the fire. The fleet gathered what strength it had left and launched toward the architect's stronghold, a massive station orbiting a dead planet, pulsing with an eerie, alien energy. The moment they entered range, the architects descended upon them. A battle unlike any other erupted. Ships twisted and turned in chaotic dogfights, explosions lighting up the void like dying stars. The Valor's wrath weaved through the carnage, heading straight for the heart of the enemy. Mara manned the weapons, her focus razor-sharp. "We got incoming. 6. No, 7 ships on our tail." Drake's hands gripped the controls. "Hold on." The ship spiraled, dodging incoming fire with expert precision. The enemy vessels pursued relentlessly, but then a bright flare filled the screen. Resistance reinforcements had arrived. Admiral Rains' flagship cut through the enemy ranks, opening a path. "Go, Drake. We'll cover you." The Valor's wrath charged ahead, breaching the station's outer defenses. They had one chance, one shot, a legacy forged in fire. Drake and his team stormed the station's control core, fighting through waves of biomechanical defenders. The air was thick with the acrid scent of burning metal and the screams of the dying. They reached the central command relay, a pulsating structure of unknown origin. "This is it," Mara breathed. "We destroy this, we shut them down." Tarek worked fast, rigging the explosives. 10 seconds. The Architect's forces pressed in, an unending tide. Drake raised his weapon, firing until the barrel glowed red-hot. Hold them off. A deafening explosion rocked the station as the relay ruptured, sending a shock wave through the enemy fleet. The Architect ships faltered, their formations breaking, their cohesion lost. The resistance struck back. One by one, the enemy fell. Drake collapsed to his knees, the alarms blaring around him. We did it! But the cost was heavy. As the Valor's Wrath escaped the crumbling station, the battlefield lay in ruins. The resistance had won, but at a great price. The stars bore witness to the sacrifices made. Drake turned to his crew, weary but alive. We honor them by surviving, by rebuilding. Mara placed a hand on his shoulder. By remembering. As the remaining ships scattered into the unknown, the legacy of the fallen carried on, not in monuments or records, but in the hearts of those who refused to be erased. And so humanity endured,